Richard Falk joins me now from here in Istanbul. He's a professor of international law at Princeton University, as well as the former UN Special Rapporteur for Palestinian human rights. Professor Falk, good to have you here on TRT World and the News Hour. This was all part of Donald Trump's so-called deal of the century. It seems now, as far as I'm reading it, that Washington isn't completely on board, at least with the timing and how this moves forward. Why is that, do you think?
Well, I think that Washington underestimated the degree of disruption that this would cause in the region and even among the Jewish communities around the world, and especially in the US. So I think there's a sense that they underestimated what the effects would be. It's a matter of Israeli sovereignty and distancing the US from the decision, although the agreement calls upon the transfer of sovereignty to be done in a diplomatic context. So it doesn't fully comply with the deal of the century if Netanyahu goes ahead unilaterally.
Okay, talking about sort of unilateral move, you are a professor of international law. Many around the world are screaming that this annexation plan by Netanyahu is against international law. How do we get from countries or a country acting unilaterally superseding international law?
Well, international law in this kind of setting is no better or worse than the geopolitics that either supports it or obstructs it. And in this case, with the United States more or less unconditionally supporting what Israel does, the fact that the annexation initiatives would be widely viewed as flagrant violations of international law is not really politically relevant. What's relevant is whether the pushback from such unilateral initiatives would be so disruptive. What's important here is the political dimension. International law cannot override geopolitical resistance. And the fact is, here, Israel enjoys unconditional US support overall, but it is possibly deterred by the anticipated pushback in the Arab world and even in Europe and elsewhere. So it's a political tug of war at this point, and very hard to know how Netanyahu will try to walk this tightrope between these two sets of pressures.
If I were to sort of play on your analogy, if this is a tug of war, then perhaps the Palestinian people is the rope. I mean, if Israel goes ahead with this plan, will anything change on the ground? Because effectively, Israel has controlled the entire West Bank for the better part of a half century.
Yes, it's a very good point that you make, because Israel has already de facto annexed a good part of the West Bank. And therefore, what's causing this stir is moving from a de facto annexation to a de jure, or a supposedly legalized annexation. And that's important because it no longer maintains the illusion that a political compromise can be reached between Israel and Palestine. And so it's the end, the burial, one might put it, of the two-state solution, which had commanded a wide international consensus.
Professor Richard Falk, pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for coming on to TRT World and to News Hour. I do appreciate your analysis.